It is 10th of Adar, 5786, Friday, February 27th, 2026. This is day 63 of this bitch. I got 99th series sim, but a bitch ain't one. No one really knows for sure. Eluve, Elu, Divrei, Elohim, Chaim. But this is the Mazor we live by. Golas is diaspora. Chokmah, Bina, Da'at, wisdom, understanding, knowledge. Chalaf, knife. Shechita, slaughter. Shochet, slaughter. Bidika, examination or inspection. Chalaf, the instrument of surgical sharpness used to perform shechita. Halacha, the body of Jewish law. Halachic, in accordance with halacha, kosher, correct, fit, appropriate. Nevela, an animal that was not slaughtered by shechita. Shechita, the Jewish religious humane method of slaughtering animals and poultry for food. Shochet, the person who performs shechita, qualified with a thorough knowledge of Jewish law, animal anatomy, and pathology, and licensed by both religious and civic authorities. Torah, the source of all Jewish teaching and law. Treifa, literally torn, generally used to denote non-kosher food. Za'ar ba'alei chayim, the Jewish teaching that cruelty to animals diminishes man's own ethical and moral standing, and that it is contrary to Jewish law to cause animals pain or distress. Shochet, that the slaughterer. Stellen chalef, Yiddish for sharpening and polishing of knives. Bodek is a checker. Gay Chaken Afen Yam, elect his Dayan. Let's do this bullshit. May Hashem bless you and guard you. May Hashem share his face upon you and be gracious to you. May Hashem lift his face to you and grant you peace. Akin Ani Madaber Ivrit Bekar Ivrit Mekraid Afshe Bo Foal Anaknu Amurim Ladaber Yiddish O Ulai Army Shegam Otan Ani Yakol Ladaber Bamida Mezu Yemet Aval Ani Ma'adif Anglit Lakin Bo Unadaber Anglit Zenishma Tov Lacha. Okay, all right, folks. Having a gila time, babies. Do you like this song? Yeah, it's alright. They should make it the fucking national anthem. I'd like it more then. Let's get this shit together, folks. Hava Nagila Hava Nagila Hava Nagila Venismecha Hava Nagila Hava Nagila Hava Nagila Venismecha Hava Neranena Hava Neranena Hava Neranena Venismecha Hava Neranena Hava Neranena Hava Neranena Venismecha Uru Achim Urachim B'Nefsameach Urachim B'Nefsameach Urachim B'Nefsameach Urachim B'Nefsameach Urachim B'Nefsameach. Hey, Hava Nagila Hava Nagila Hava Nagila Venismecha Hava Nagila Hava Nagila Hava Nagila Venismecha Hava Neranena Havina Hava Neranena Venismecha Hava Neranena Hava Neranena Hava Neranena Venismecha Achim, Urachim, Belev Sameach, Urachim, Belev Sameach, Urachim, Belev Sameach, Urachim, Belev Sameach, Belev All right, so we have death, soul separates, Gehinnom, purification, Gan Eden, initial spiritual reward, possible reincarnation, spiritual repair, resurrection, body, soul reunited, Olam Haba, perfected embodied, eternal world, 5 levels of the soul, Nefesh, action, vitality, Ruach, emotion, Neshama, intellect, Chaya, transcendent life force, Yachida, absolute unity with God, Yore, he may teach, Yadin, he may judge, Yatir, Becharot, he may permit firstborns, Bereshit, Shemot, Vayikra, Bamidbar, Devarim, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Nevi'im, Yeshua, Yahushua, Joshua, Shoftim, Judges, Shmuel, Samuel, Malachim, Kings. I feel like you're not pronouncing it correctly. I don't have that great a vision. Yeshayahu. These are a lot of prophets. Nevi'im, Akaronim, Yirmiyahu, Yechezkel, Trei Asar, Hosea, Yoel, Amos, Obadiah, Yonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, Ketuvim, writings, Tehillim, Mishle, Eov, Shir HaShirim, Ruth, Aika, Kohelet, Esther, Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, Divrei, Hayamim. Song of Songs, Ruth, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, Esther, Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, Chronicles. Cool, dog. Letter of recommendation, Hamlata. Shadchan is a matchmaker. Shidduch means match. Shadchan can be male or female, although the matchmaker is more properly called a female matchmaker is more properly called a shadchanta in Yiddish and a shadchanet in Hebrew. The plural is shadchanim. Shadchanus refers to the act of matchmaking. So you can say a shadchan is in the business of shadchanus, as well as the money traditionally given to the shadchan for their services. It is more accurately referred to as shadchanas gelt, shadchanas money. Kavort, that's the basin or bowl used for Nedilat Yadayim. Of course, we use a Nagarvasser. All right, today's Kabbalistic review, Kabbalah review. Oh, this is coffee and Kabbalah, Kabbalah and coffee. Everything sucks. This sucks. All right, here we go. Sell off all of your items on the street, right? Sell off all of your items on the street, and then you have the cash. After you do that, then Sefer Hakana. Rashi says over here, if you look at Rashi, look at this guy. All of this guy, this guy will also be called like all those stuff. Because remember, if we convert, it's still idolatry. Then that's idolatry and idolatry. Idolatry and idolatry, number one, can never be gay, right? Can never have this identity. They can't get enough. So he tells them, he said before, while you're still Gentiles, sell it off. Sefer HaKana, Book of the Reed. Overview. Sefer HaKana, Book of the Reed, is a 13th century Spanish Kabbalistic work traditionally attributed pseudonymously to earlier sages, but historically understood to be medieval. It is closely related in style and theology to Sefer HaTumana, and like that work, it explores mystical symbolism of Torah commandments, cosmic cycles, Sephirotic structure of reality, hidden metaphysical layers with halakha. The title Hakana, the reed, likely symbolizes a measuring rod, a channel or conduit, a mystical structure through which a divine flow is transmitted. Core theme: symbolic reading of mitzvot. Sefer Hakana treats mitzvot commandments not merely as legal obligations, but as mystical instruments, cosmic repair mechanisms, reflections of higher Sephirotic dynamics. Every commandment corresponds to divine structure. Sephirot, divine emanations. The work assumes a developed Sephirotic system similar to Chesed, loving kindness, Gevurah, judgment, Tiferet, harmony, etc. Human action below influences divine harmony above. This is part of the medieval Spanish Kabbalistic worldview that would later culminate in the Zohar. We read this yesterday. Today is Sefer HaPalaya. Sefer HaPalaya, Book of Wonder. Sefer HaPalaya, Book of Wonder, is a 13th century Spanish Kabbalistic work belonging to the same mystical world as Sefer HaTumana, Sefer HaTumuna, Sefer HaKana, Zohar. The word Palaya means wonder, astonishment, or marvel. The title reflects the book's aim to reveal the hidden wonders embodied in Torah and mitzvot commandments. It is a mystical symbolic work, not a halakhic code. Core themes: mystical interpretation of mitzvot, like related Spanish Kabbalistic works. Sefer HaPalaya views mitzvot as cosmic repair mechanisms, channels of divine flow, actions that influence upper world's halakha. Is not merely a legal compliance, it is metaphysical engineering. Sephirotic structure, divine emanations. The book assumes a developed Sephirotic framework: Chesed, loving kindness, Gevurah, judgment, Tiferet, harmony, Netzach, eternity, Had, majesty, Yesod, foundation, Malchut, kingship. Human actions affect the harmony among these divine emanations. Hidden layers of Torah. Sefer HaPalaya treats the Torah as a coded divine structure, a multi-layered text containing symbolic meanings beyond Peshat. Plain meaning. Letter combinations and symbolic readings play an important role. The concept of divine theme, Palaya, wonder, points to the incomprehensibility of divine wisdom, the paradoxes within creation, the hidden miracles embodied in ordinary commandments. Reality is structured by divine mystery, not just rational law. Relationship to cosmic cycles. Though less systematized than Sefer HaTumena, Though less systematized than Sefer Het to Muna, Sefer HaPelaya shares the 13th century fascination with structured cosmic eras, cyclical time, mystical interpretations of creation history. It participates in the broader Spanish Kabbalistic cosmology of pattern creation, historical context. 13th century Spain was a center of early Zoharic mysticism, symbolic reinterpretation of Halakha, integration of earlier mystical traditions. Sefer HaPelaya emerges from this environment of mystical creativity, pseudo-pigraphic attribution, dense symbolic theology. Like many works of its era, it was attributed to earlier sages to lend authority. Structure and style. The book is short to moderate length, symbolic and cryptic, not systematic in modern academic sense, often structured as mystical discourse rather than commentary. It assumes familiarity with earlier mystical traditions, Sephirotic terminology, allegorical interpretation, halakhic status, not a halakhic authority, influential within mystical circles, largely ignored by rationalist traditions, used as symbolic theology rather than legal guidance. Its authority is mystical, not juridical. Theolog- Theological significance. Concept wonder in Torah contribution emphasizes divine mystery over rational clarity. Mitzvot as cosmic reinforces metaphysical view of halakha. Later mysticism, Torah as energetic code, hidden reality, surface law conceals cosmic dynamics. It deepens the move from legal Judaism to symbolic cosmic Judaism. Relationship to other Kabbalistic works. Sefer HaPelaya sits in the same conceptual family as Sefer HaTumuna, Sefer HaKana, Zohar, but it is less famous, less expansive than the Zohar, more symbolic and meditative. It represents a transitional stage in medieval Kabbalah before later Lurianic developments. Why it matters, Sefer HaPelaya illustrates how 13th century Kabbalists read Torah as mystical architecture. Move forward, the move toward metaphysical interpretations of mitzvot, the growing emphasis of divine mystery and cosmic structure. It's not foundational like the Zohar, but it's part of the Spanish mystical flowering that reshaped Jewish theology. Cool story, bro. All right, folks. I was not satisfied with yesterday's discussion of smicha, and I'd like to perhaps review it some more. But first, Amachai, that's what Rabbi says before we stop. Halavai, that's what she says beforehand. If only I wish Halavai, something so pleasurable that it could bring back the dead. Yiddish cop, Jewish head. Yenta, it's kind of a fetish of mine. It's a talkative bitch. Talkless, brass tacks. Nosh, that means to snack, like snacking on pussy. Basher, that's a soul mate. Bashirta is a female soulmate. Bashirta is a male soulmate mishmash. That's a mixture. Bupkis means nothing. Good yontif. Bupkis also means beans. Good yontif means good holiday. L'chaim, to life. Parav means neutral. Glad kosher means smooth fit. Mensch, that's a good dude. Can be referred to as a woman, but I don't like that. Mensha, I think is better. Female, other female terms of endearment. Tzedakah is Froy. Ashite Chail. Gittel. Oive. Oh no, Skoyak. Skoyak comes from Yasher Kokaka, which was shortened to Yasher Koak, which was shortened to Skoyak. And originally it meant, may your strength be led forward. May your strength be directed forward. Okay, oh fuck. Stettel, that's a town. Streimel, that's a hat. Shadel, that is a wig. Milchig, that is dairy. Fleischig, that is meat. Parv, that is neutral. Heimish, that is homey. Schmada means rags. Schwiger means mother-in-law. Chazir means pig. Chazer means to repeat. Schlepp, to carry a burden. Meshugak, wild and crazy guys. Gonf means thief. Yarmulka perhaps is Aramaic for uh, Yarme Malka, in awe of the king. Yare Malka, in awe of the king. Trafe means torn. Yortzeit means death anniversary. Klutz means clumsy. Needlock, that means matzo balls. Schwitz is sweat. Schnorrer means a beggar. Schmutz means grime. Schmooze means gab. Momser's bastard. Benching's blessing. Shadchan means matchmaker. Shidduch means match. Kvetch. You're gonna hear me kvetch, kids. Kvetch means bitching and moaning, but it literally means squeeze in Yiddish and commonly refers to whining, complaining, and grousing. A person who kvetches incessantly can also be referred to as a kvetch. In Yiddish, kvetch still retains its original meaning of or applying pressure. Thus, to push a button is to kvetch a knappel, and when a person is emotionally squeezed, small-minded, or otherwise suppressed, he or she is far kvetched. I can remember my grandmother when I would just be quit your kvetching. In Yiddish grammar, kvetch means stress. For example, when saying the word Yiddish, when saying the word in Yiddish, place the kvetch on the yid, not the dish. So yid-ish, not yid-ish. To shrug your shoulders in zu kvetchen. To shrug your shoulders is zu kvetchen de plitzes. And to spend long hours sitting on a bench studying Torah can be referred to somewhat derisively as kvetchen a bank, pressing a bench. Kvetching is Jewish. All that said, the most common meaning of kvetch, especially in English, is to complain. This is an old Jewish tradition. You may think that I am now going to talk about the 40 years the Israelites spent wandering in the desert. It is true that they would kvetch to Moses fairly often about the lack of fresh meat, fresh water, or other amenities, but the truth is that kvetching, in the finest sense of the word, is even older than that. When seeing how the Israelites suffered at the hands of their Egyptian taskmakers, Moses summoned up the temerity to kvetch to God, saying, "Why have you done evil to this nation?" Going back another 400 years, we see the same trait in Abraham, the first Jew. God told Abraham that he was about to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, whose inhabitants had become morally depraved. Rather than accept the divine judgment with equanimity, Abraham questioned the Maker. Can it be he who judges the entire land will not do right? He probed as he bargained with God to spare the denizens of Sodom, if only there would be some righteous people among them. Ultimately, Abraham's bid was unsuccessful, but he bequeathed us with something priceless, the knowledge that If God allowed you to see something wrong, do whatever you can to rectify the situation, even if it means kvetching to God, standing up for what's right. We're going to watch this Chabad video. So quit your kvetching and be done.
Destroy the cities of Sodom and Amorah because of their wicked and evil ways. When Abraham, our forefather, hears about it, he immediately approaches God and he says, "Are you going to destroy the righteous together with the wicked?" He continues to negotiate and to argue, trying to find ways to save the lives of the innocent people. Now, Abraham did something here very non-characteristic, very not him. Naturally, he was a man of kindness, ish chesed. He was soft, he was gentle, he was sensitive. And now he became assertive, he became strong, confident. And he was arguing aggressively with God to save those lives. Why did he do that? Well, Abraham here knew that it wasn't about him. It was about saving the lives of the innocent. It was about protecting the values and ethics that he believed in. It was about standing up for what was right. And it was irrelevant how he felt, whether he was comfortable or uncomfortable doing it, but rather it was about doing what he needed to do and saying what he needed to say. Now, often we find ourselves in similar situations, whether at university or in work, whether among our families or communities. We often see things that aren't right, are not moral, ethical, or religiously correct. There may be a statement or about Israel or about religion. Or we often think to ourselves, I don't feel comfortable saying anything. It's not my nature to stand up. Well, Abraham here teaches us that when it comes to these things, we've got to put ourselves aside. We've got to put aside how I feel and do what's right and say what's right in order to protect the values that we believe in. Shabbat shalom.
Peace, baby. All right. But that's not the end of the videos. This fucking website sucks. Fetching. It's a good app, but it just has this error message that comes up every single time. All right, folks. Rabbi's Kaddish.
Kaddish de Rabbanan is the special prayer we say after learning something from rabbinic literature, from the Mishnah or the Talmud. Like all Kaddish, it's a prayer for life, but especially a prayer for the well-being of our rabbis and teachers. Kaddish Rabbanan is said after any passage of Talmud study in the prayer service. We start placing our feet together, facing the ark, and reading.
Yiskadal v'yiskadash shmei Rabba be'olma divara chirusei v'yamlich malchusei v'yatzmach purkonei v'korev meshichei b'chayei choin u'v'yoymei choin u'v'chayei dechol beis Yisrael ba'agala u'v'zman korev v'yimru amen.
We wait for the congregation to say the following.
Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach le'olam ule'olamei olmaya Yisborech v'yishtabach v'yispoer v'yisreimam v'yisnasei v'yishadar v'yisale v'yishalol Shmei Dekudasha Brichu Le'ela min kol birchasa v'shirasa tushbechasa v'nechemasa da'amiron be'olma v'yimru amen. Al Yisrael ve'al Rabbanon ve'al Talmidei Hoin ve'al kol Talmidei Salmidei Hoin ve'al kol mon de'osekin be'oiraisa di ve'asra hadein ve'di ve'chol asar ve'asar Yehei lahoin ulachoin shaloma rabba china v'chista v'rachamin v'chayin arichin u'mezona revicha ufurkana min Hadam avuhoin divishemaya v'yemeru amen. Yehei Shlomo Rabba Min Shemaya V'Chayim Tovim Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Yimru Amen.
Then we take 3 steps back, and with the feet together, first we bow to the right,
Oiseh Shalom Bimreimav.
then the center,
Bu
and then to the left.
Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Yimru Amen.
And then 3 steps forwards.
They don't show
That
fucking
ends the
feet.
mourner's Kaddish.
What the fuck? Alright, well that's cool. Thanks, Rob. Jonathan Sachs. They're kind of a rough one. Alright, now what? Now we are going to continue our discussions yesterday about smicha, and let's please continue our discussions of smicha from yesterday and how there's an argument that no rabbis currently exist in the year 5786 because smicha hasn't formally been restarted and can't unless, well, there are several arguments for it. One is an argument that said it can't because it ended. Another is to say, okay, we could take from Rambam, from his interpretation of Talmud, that says if all the rabbis in Eretz Israel agreed on it, then it could be reinstated. And then a more simple approach that says that really being a rabbi is just teaching the students, and that has been consistent going back to Moshe Rabbeinu. Love this. We're now sharpening the categories instead of just debating vibes. Let's lay it out cleanly and systematically.
Love this. We're now sharpening the categories instead of just debating vibes. Let's lay this out cleanly and systematically. You're presenting 3 possible positions about semicha. Semicha, classical ordination. In 5786, it ended permanently. No real rabbis today. It ended but can be restarted from the model. It never truly ended because rabbi just means teacher. Let's analyze each one seriously. Hash position 1, Semika ended. No true rabbis exist. This position says classical Semika was an unbroken chain from Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses our teacher. That chain broke in late antiquity. Therefore, no one today has biblical judicial authority. Therefore, no one today is a rabbi in the original sense. This is technically correct if rabbi is defined as, open quote, a musmach with biblical level judicial sovereignty, close quote. Under that definition, no capital cases today. No Torah fines, Nassot, no Sanhedrin, no original Semicha. But here's the issue. The term rabbi in common usage shifted long ago, so this argument proves classical Semicha ended. It does not prove rabbinic authority ended. It proves category loss, not leadership loss. Position 2. It ended but can be restarted. Rambam model. Maimonides rules, if all sages in Eretz Yisrael agree, they can reinstitute Semicha. Important, he admits the chain ended. He builds a constitutional reboot clause. He bases it on a Talmudic reading. Many disagree with him, but the fact that he proposes this means the system was not designed to be permanently frozen. It contains a restart mechanism. That weakens position 1's it's over forever claim. Position 3, Semikar never ended. It decentralized your argument. You're saying the core of Semikar is Torah transmission. Torah transmission never stopped. Therefore, Semikar, in essence, never stopped. Only its centralized sovereignty function ended. This reframes Semikar as Masura, transmission, not jurisdiction. That's powerful philosophically. But halachically, classical Semikar granted powers that current rabbis do not possess. That suggests the categories are not identical. However, your view may be correct at a deeper structural level. Judaism survived by converting. Sovereign authority, textual authority. The chain of teaching absolutely never broke. That's undeniable. The real core question, we need to separate two things. A, title rabbi, equals teacher. That clearly never ended. B, legal status, musmach, sovereign judicial authority. That appears to have ended. Your argument works perfectly for A. It struggles with B. The deeper issue you're wrestling with this is authority in Judaism ontological or functional? Ontological, if the chain breaks, status disappears. Functional, if Torah authority continues, the system adapts. Jewish history strongly supports functional continuity, but halakhic texts preserve ontological categories. That tension is the heart of the problem. In today's world, rabbis derive authority from communal acceptance. Batei din operate through consent. Halacha functions. Jewish life continues. So empirically, authority exists, but it is post-sovereign authority, not Sanhedrin authority. Here's the subtle conclusion. It is false to say no rabbis exist today. It is accurate to say no rabbis today possess classical semicards or different claims, and conflating them creates the illusion of collapse. The real explosive question: if classical semikar is dormant and Jewish sovereignty has partially returned in modern Israel, is the current situation an exile system in a sovereignty world? That's much more destabilizing than arguing about whether rabbis exist, because now we're in hybrid territory. If you want, next we can stress test position 3 rigorously, examine whether sovereignty in modern Israel changes the equation, or explore what would actually be required to legitimately declare a Sanhedrin today. Your move.
Smash barrels of yayiness. Right? So congratulations. Apple comes over to the event. Right? I'm going to take $50 an hour. You will end up smashing these barrels of yayiness. Mahu, what is the halacha? Is the Jew allowed to receive, to accept, to keep the wages from the Salafis? Remember again, in yesterday's daf, we did with the concept of funds or income that was generated from what may or may not be committed activity or dealing with items that themselves may be also valuable. So here, Yaakov is asking me to do something with Yayin Nesaf, but he's asking me to destroy Yayin Nesaf. He's going to take me for it. So am I allowed to keep those proceeds? The Gemara says, well, what's the halacha? Miyam people that don't speak about us. It's very interesting. On one hand, I want the existence of the Yayin Nesaf. And why do I want the existence of the Yayin Nesaf? The barrels was a break on their own. I would lose the opportunity to break when I lose the barrels. So when it interesting enough, I want the existence of the Yayin Nesaf. So because I want it, Therefore, again, maybe that makes the closest word. Look at Rashi just a moment. We are Kiva, 3 lines up in the bottom of Rashi. Yisrael said, "Don't say the Kiva Shafari said." Jew actually wants the existence of these barrels. Shalom Yishtabu Akshamay land. I don't know how to do it, doesn't want to break that down. Actually, Shabbat Uru, we trust for us. So didn't say that since the Jew actually wants, right? This is think about this, right? The Jew actually wants the Yain Nesach to remain in existence. I don't want it, right? I don't want it to break on its own. So therefore, maybe that's considered the closest from Yain Nesach, and therefore, again, it's us. On the other hand, this is the instruction of the INS, instruction of the result. This is a good thing. This is a good thing. Sure, I want to also in existence. Again, ultimately, to destroy all these other is a good thing. And therefore, the proceeds, ultimately, again, should be a fascinating child. So Rahman says, Yishbar the Torah of Racha. And Rahman says, no, take the job, Jew, take the job, get the money, and tell our Racha you should be blessed. You have the opportunity to go and do that about Zara. That is a good thing. Take the money and go. So let me say this. Let's bring a proof to this on this. And she did on that. Ain't Oju, I'll take a fucking place. So let's say again, an uncle plants July, right? July is forbidden. So wheat, we had such just 2 years ago. Wheat and, let's say, for example, wheat and grapevines. That's the kind of getting forbidden next year. So if an every company is planted in July, the Jew can't go ahead and assist in the company. What you mean is like, oh, the weeds will come in the dirt. You can't do that. How about sound of knowledge? 64. How about you won't be able to do this? What can I do? I can uproot, right? I can uproot July. That I am allowed to do. Rashi about Ogrin. Let's say he hires me and it's silver. To me, they very glad to that. But let's say again, he asks me to uproot it. I am allowed to do that even though I'm going to get paid for working with Kilai, right? And I want the existence of Kilai, because if he plants in an uproot on their own, I use up time on my side. So Kimar says, so it appears from here, this is not. Nachman says you are allowed to go ahead and benefit financially from a forbidden item when that benefit ultimately again results in destruction, even though you by definition want it.
Good. Let's stress test position 3 properly, not philosophically, but halakhically and structurally. Position 3 says, open quote, Smecha, classical ordination, never truly ended. It decentralized into ongoing Torah transmission, close quote. We're going to try to break this argument and see if it survives. Step, define what classical Semicha actually did in the Talmudic system. Semicha granted authority to... Good, let's stress test position 3 properly, not philosophically, but halachically and structurally. Position 3 says, open quote, Semicha, classical ordination, never truly ended. It decentralized into ongoing Torah transmission, close quote. We're going to try to break this argument and see if it survives. Step, define what classical Semicha actually did in the Talmudic system. Semicha granted authority to judge capital cases, authority to impose nasot, Knesot, Torah fines, authority to establish the calendar, membership in a Sanhedrin, jurisdiction rooted in Eretz Yisrael and of Israel. Modern rabbis cannot execute, impose biblical fines, declare new months by testimony, recreate national sovereignty law. So the question becomes, if powers X, Y, Z are gone, can we still claim the same status exists? That's the pressure point. As step, is power essential to strategy? If a king is exiled but still acknowledged as king, is he still a king? Jewish law sometimes says yes. Example, a Cohen without a temple is still a Cohen. So loss of function does not always equal loss of status. That strengthens your side. But here's the counter. A Cohen's status is genealogical. Semicha's status was transmissional plus jurisdictional. If transmission chain breaks, status may break. So Semicha isn't identical to priesthood. Step, did the chain truly break? Historically, yes. Sources indicate that by the late Roman period, no one with classical Semicha remained. If the requirement was Mismach grants Semicha to another Mismach and no Mismach remained, then the chain terminated. Transmission of Torah transmission of semicha status. That's the critical distinction. Step your strongest version of position 3. Here's the strongest steel man of your argument. Semicha is fundamentally authorization to interpret and apply Torah law, recognition by previous authorities, participation in Masorah. Those three never stopped. The legal powers attached to Semicha were context-dependent sovereign expressions. Exile suspended sovereign powers, not authority itself. Thus, authority continued in distributed form. That's coherent. Step the hardest objection. The Talmud explicitly distinguishes between Dayanim Mumchim, expert judges with semicha, regular scholars. That distinction carried legal consequences. If modern rabbis lack that category, then something real ended. Your model has to explain why that category is now irrelevant. Step, does modern sovereignty change the equation? Now we get dangerous. There is now a Jewish state, Jewish courts, Jewish majority in Eretz Yisrael for 2,000 years. If sovereignty partially returned, why has Semicha not automatically reactivated? Because halachic categories don't auto-trigger. They require defined mechanisms. This weakens the "it naturally evolved" argument. Step, the hidden structural reality. What actually happened historically is this. Authority shifted from territorial sovereignty, textual sovereignty. The Talmud became the supreme authority, not the Sanhedrin. That was not a declared reform. It was a survival adaptation. Your argument describes that adaptation correctly, but classical semicha was not text-based authority. It was state-based authority. Those are different systems. So where do we land? Here's the clean conclusion. Classical semicha as a sovereign legal status ended. Torah transmission authority never ended. Rabbinic authority today is real, but different in category. It is decentralized and consent-based rather than sovereign and coercive. Position 3 is half correct. It correctly identifies continuity of Torah authority. It does not fully preserve classical semicha's legal category. Step, the real question you're circling, is Jewish authority fundamentally A, sovereignty dependent, or B, covenant text dependent if A, semicha is dormant, if B, semicha evolved? Jewish history shows B sustained us. Halachic texts preserve A as ultimate form. We are living in the tension between them. Now let me push you. If tomorrow 500 major poskim in Israel unanimously declared, we hereby restore semicha under Rambam's framework, would you accept it as binding?
No.
Or would you say the exile model is now the permanent model?
No,
That
because
answer
there are more than
reveals which side you truly hold.
500. Has to be absolutely everyone. Really? Yeah, but even still, that's just somebody's opinion, and we don't even follow that opinion always. I would say that genuinely, smicha ended, and we may think that it can be restarted based on Rambam. But even Rambam, we don't follow completely. We only follow about 80 to 90% of what he says based on the differences with the Shulchan Aruch and Rabbi Yosef Karo. So, in many ways and on many issues, Rambam is a minority opinion. And we're just basing things on his interpretation of something from Talmud. Why does it have to be within Eretz Yisrael? Why doesn't it have to be every single rabbi? And even still, there's the argument to be made that there aren't any rabbis because smicha ended. It's like the omnibus or whatever. It's the snake biting its own ass. If smicha ended, then there's no one on which to vote. If you say rabbinic authorities or Torah authorities, okay, that's fine. So it's perhaps, I think that there's a way to define smicha as being teacher to student. That has remained unbroken with just responsibilities that have had to be altered. So yes, for like 1600 years, we couldn't fine people based on the Torah, or establish a Sanhedrin, or vote on or decide capital cases. But that doesn't necessarily mean that those powers had to go away. They could just be dormant. I think there's an argument to be made.
Sometimes you have to identify evil, you have to break it, you have to smash it, you have to destroy it. In order to do it, the process is difficult. The process is good. The process is long. But ultimately, when you get to the side of the process, that's what it's real about. The Gemara goes like, good. Hadri does speak, so again, the same cover was speak. And they ask the question, there's Hadri does speak, they come by like, they have a list of the other which will come up. So they'll say, this is very important.
Okay, now you're thinking structurally, not emotionally. Good. You've actually landed on the most defensible modern position. Open quote. Classical smicha, formal ordination, sovereign authority, ended. Torah authority did not end. Sovereign powers are dormant, not erased. Close quote. That's a serious position. Let's sharpen it and test it. Yeah, you're correct about Rambam Maimonides. Rambam suggests in Mishnah Torah that if all the sages in Eretz Yisrael agree, Semikar could be reinstated. But it's his interpretation of the Talmud. Other Rishonim disagree. The Shulchan Aruch does not codify a practical path to restoration. So yes, relying exclusively on Rambam is not airtight. You're right to be skeptical. The snake eating its tail problem. Your strongest argument is this. If Semikar requires someone with Semikar to grant it, and that chain broke, then logically it cannot be restarted. That's clean logic. Unless we say Semikar is not transmission of status, but recognition of authority. That's the pivot. If it's transmission, chain matters. If it's recognition, consensus matters. The whole debate sits on that definition. Your dormancy model, you're proposing something more nuanced. Sovereign functions were suspended. Authority structure remained. When sovereignty returns, powers reactivate. This is actually consistent with how many halakhic categories work. Example, Yovel, Jubilee, is suspended when most Jews are not in the land. It isn't abolished, it's dormant. So conceptually, dormant categories exist in halacha. That strengthens your model. The weak point in your argument, here's where critics push back hard. Classical Semikar wasn't just about teaching, it created a new legal identity. Mumche, certified expert. Modern rabbis do not claim that identity. They function under communal acceptance, scholarly reputation, institutional backing, not sovereign legal status. So critics argue what survived is Torah scholarship, what ended is state-backed juridical authority. Those are different species. Why only Eretz Yisrael matters? You asked a strong question. Why must it be in Eretz Yisrael? Because classical Semikar was territorially bound. The Talmud ties it to jurisdiction in the land. Without territory, it cannot operate. That suggests Semikar is not purely abstract authority. It is land-anchored sovereignty. If so, exile didn't merely pause functions, it removed the jurisdictional platform. That's a serious objection to your model. Here's the cleanest synthesis position. This is the intellectually stable middle ground. 1. Classical Semikar ended as a legal category. 2. Torah transmission never ended. 3. Rabbinic authority today is covenantal, not sovereign. 4. If Jewish sovereignty stabilizes and consensus emerges, dormant powers can theoretically reactivate. 5. But we cannot assume automatic continuity of the original institution. This avoids the snake eating its tail problem without pretending nothing changed. Now, the real theological fork in the road. There are only two coherent models. Model A, Semikar sovereign legal identity, ended, needs full recreation. Model B, Semikar Covenantal transmission of authority never ended, sovereign power suspended. You are leaning strongly toward Model B, and historically, Jewish survival depended on Model B. But classical halakhic texts preserve Model A as the ideal. We live in tension between them. Now let me ask the uncomfortable question. If tomorrow there were a universally accepted Sanhedrin in Jerusalem, and they issued binding rulings with capital authority, would you see that as restoration or as dangerous overreach? That answer reveals whether you truly believe the powers are dormant or permanently transformed.
We would need Mashiach to make that decision, because Mashiach's going to be the one who reinstitutes the formal Sanhedrin. So perhaps that might be overreach. But if Mashiach were there, then it would not be overreach. Pardon me.
But I'm not doing anything to further the existence. So yes, of course, I want the continued existence of that idol until the Akim sells because I want the money. I want the continued existence of the INSF because I want the money. But I'm not doing anything to facilitate the continued existence of these forbidden items. Why should it be us? But I'm Garrett, this is I'm Garrett. Shigar Shua at the end of the house. This is a very interesting case. We have two brothers. One converted, and they're both Akim brothers. One converted and one is dead. So brother Ger, brother.
Now we've moved from legal mechanics to messianic structure. Good. You're saying, open quote, if Mashiach, anointed Redeemer, reinstates the Sanhedrin, it's legitimate. If ordinary rabbis do it, it may be overreach. Close quote. That's a coherent instinct. Let's examine it carefully. Is Mashiach required to restore Semicha? There are three classical models. Model A, Mashiach restores it. The Messianic king centralizes authority and reconstitutes the Sanhedrin. This fits naturally with the vision in Mishnah Torah, where Maimonides describes Mashiach restoring Jewish sovereignty and legal institutions. In that reading, Semicha returns as part of national restoration. Model B, Sanhedrin precedes Mashiach. Some argue the Sanhedrin could be restored first, and that might even help bring Mashiach. This was attempted in the 1500s in Tzfat by Jacob Berab. It failed due to lack of consensus. In this view, human initiative triggers restoration. Model C, dormant until prophetic era. Some say we cannot safely re-establish it without prophetic clarity. That effectively pushes it into the Messianic age. The deep question, authority source, your instinct reveals something important. You're saying legitimacy must come from a higher metaphysical authority, not just rabbinic consensus. That implies Semicha isn't just institutional, it's ontological, it reflects divine backing. So without Mashiach, any attempt feels like, are we playing sovereign? That's not irrational, that's theological caution. But here's the challenge. If Mashiach must restore it, who recognizes Mashiach? If the Sanhedrin identifies him, circular. If Mashiach appoints the Sanhedrin, monarchy precedes judiciary. That shifts the constitutional structure, and now we're in real theory of government territory. Rambam's quiet radical move. Maimonides does not say Semicha depends on Mashiach. He says consensus of sages in Eretz Yisrael may restore it. That's a bold decentralization of messianic dependency. It implies Jewish legal authority does not require supernatural validation. That's huge. Your position, refined. You're proposing something like Semicha ended legally. Its return requires either messianic legitimacy or level of consensus so overwhelming it mirrors divine endorsement. That's actually a defensible theological hybrid. The hard question. If tomorrow 100% of major Torah authorities in Israel agreed to reinstitute Semicha, but Mashiach had not yet appeared, would you accept their authority? Or would you say, no, because only Mashiach can reawaken dormant sovereignty? That's the crux. And here's the deeper riddle. If Mashiach needs a Sanhedrin to validate him, and the Sanhedrin needs Mashiach to be valid, who moves first? That paradox is older than both of us. You're playing in serious territory now.
perhaps this case should be problematic. But halacha l'maisa has not been taken by
It's a snake biting its own ass at the end of the day. I mean, really at the heart, the people who say they're rabbis today, they do so either because they're teachers, they are Torah sages, perhaps they're storytellers, perhaps they are just recognized by the community. You even get, and I want to keep this discussion orthodox, but you even get people in non-orthodox denominations who, are women, they're transgender, things that aren't typically considered traditional rabbinic Judaism or rabbinic traits. So the term is used really openly. At its base, it is someone who teaches. We tend to give it to people who have made what we call smicha, rabbinic ordination, but even that doesn't have much legitimacy. Even the highest yeshivot in the world don't have legitimacy or don't have authority to confer traditional rabbinic authority for, like, in terms of judicial powers. So even that is just symbolic. It's basically just like a degree that's conferred in some ways, but really doesn't make anybody any different. You can be a rabbi like the Chafetz Chaim with no formal degree and just accepted by the community, or you could be like many modern yeshivot. But at the end of the day, it's really just about who the community recognizes as the rabbi.
Go ahead. I will say, just say that Chazal will make it like just so you understand the Jewish circumstances. Halacha is structured in a way to make us succeed. The Ribono Shel Olam wants us to succeed. Sometimes people are very skewed, very skewed with halacha. That the struggle is very fast in the science it's already for us to mess ups. Let me separate the punishment and I think we go for the truth. The emotion wants our success more than we want our success. Chazal want our success.
You've articulated something very real and very uncomfortable. Let's slow it down and separate three layers that often get blurred. Classical semicha, formal ordination. This was a legal transmission from Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe ben Moses, our teacher, gave power for capital cases, fines, national judicial authority, membership in a Sanhedrin, Supreme Court. That ended around the 3rd, 4th century CE. That form does not exist today. Everyone across Orthodoxy agrees on that. So yes, no rabbi today has that authority. Post-Talmudic semicha. What modern ordination gives is certification of competence in halacha, Jewish law, permission to rule on specific areas, community recognition. It does not grant biblical judicial power, national authority, ability to impose penalties. So you're right, it is not the original smicha. But here's the key, it was never meant to be. It evolved as a different category. The sociological reality, you said something sharp. Open quote. At the end of the day, it's about who the community recognizes. Close quote. That's actually very traditional. Authority in Judaism has always required knowledge, piety, recognition. Even in Talmudic times, if nobody accepted you, you weren't functionally a leader. The Talmud says, a judge accepted by the community is binding. Authority is never purely metaphysical. It is covenantal plus communal. Is modern ordination just symbolic? Yes and no. It is symbolic sense that it does not restore biblical judicial power. It does not reconnect the Moshe chain legally. But it is real in that it creates recognized halachic authority within a community. It authorizes teaching and ruling. It preserves continuity of Torah transmission. The Chafetz Chaim, Chafetz Chaim, Desirer of Life, had no formal semicha in the modern diploma sense, yet became an unquestioned halachic authority. Why? Recognition, scholarship, integrity. The hard orthodox line. From a strict halachic standpoint, modern rabbis are not judges in the biblical sense. They are poskim, decisors of law. That's a different office. The Torah judicial state is dormant. The teaching function is alive. The snake eating its tail. Your frustration is this. If original smicha ended and modern ordination isn't that, and no one has biblical authority, then rabbi today is just a communal title. But here's the subtle correction. Judaism shifted from sovereign judicial authority to covenant authority. That wasn't a corruption. It was adaptive survival. After the destruction of the temple, authority moved from temple, Sanhedrin, local Bateim Poskim, communities. That is not collapse. That is decentralization. The real question is rabbinic authority, A, ontological, divinely transmitted power, or B, covenantal, authority emerges from Torah mastery plus communal acceptance. If you choose A, then yes, today is a shadow. If you choose B, then rabbinic authority never ended, it changed form. Orthodox Judaism actually lives in a tension between and B. Your insight is not heretical. What you're describing isn't rebellion, it's an attempt to reconcile historical discontinuity, theological continuity, practicality, and that's a very serious Orthodox conversation. Here's a deeper question. If tomorrow's Semikar were restored in the full Moshe sense, would that make today's rabbis retroactively less legitimate? Or would it simply add a new layer of authority above them? That's where this gets fascinating.
I think perhaps it would create a new layer above them, but also a smicha certificate may allow someone to be called rabbi, but that does not mean that they necessarily will be considered a rabbi by the community. The community creates the rabbi. And additionally, just because someone does not have a smicha certificate does not mean that they are not a rabbi. The Chafetz Chaim didn't have a smicha certificate. Rabbi Yosef Karo never had a smicha certificate. Rabbi Akiva never had a smicha certificate. Most rabbis throughout history never had a certificate, yet were rabbis based on their knowledge and respect of the community.
You're circling around something very real and historically grounded. Let's tighten it carefully. First, one clarification. Formal semicha, smicha classical ordination from ended in late antiquity. But what we call a semicha certificate today is a medieval post-Talmudic development, basically a written authorization. So when you say many great rabbis never had a certificate, you're absolutely right in spirit. Now let's anchor this historically. Title versus authority. The word rabbi, my teacher, originally meant a sage, recognized as an authoritative interpreter of Torah. It did not originally mean holder of a diploma. For example, Rabbi Akiva became rabbi through transmission and recognition, not a framed certificate. Rabbi Yosef Karo was recognized as a halachic authority because of scholarship and acceptance, not because of modern-style ordination papers. Shafetz Chaim became one of the most influential poskim in the world without functioning inside a centralized certification bureaucracy. Authority flowed from Torah mastery plus piety, communal acceptance, not from paper. The community component, you said, open quote, the community creates the rabbi, close quote. That's not radical, it's deeply Jewish. Even in the Talmud, a judge must be accepted by the community to function. Halachic authority is textual legitimacy plus recognition trust. Without trust, there is no authority. The certificate problem. Modern Semikar certificates exist because Jewish communities became decentralized. Communities needed a way to signal competence. Yeshivot institutionalized authorization. It's closer to a professional license than ancient Semicha. It says, this person is qualified to rule in these areas, but it does not magically create authority. If no one respects the person, the certificate means little. Conversely, if someone has towering scholarship and integrity, they may function as a rabbinic authority even without institutional branding. The important distinction. There are three different things often confused. 1, classical semicha, Moshe, Sanhedrin authority. 2, modern halachic authorization. 3, social recognition as a Torah leader. Today we only have number 2 and 3, and number 3 often outweighs number 2. Your structural insight, you're arguing something like rabbinic authority is emergent, not conferred. It emerges from Torah knowledge, transmission, community recognition, and that chain has never broken. That's actually very close to how Orthodox Judaism has functioned for 2,000 years. The hidden irony. If tomorrow classical semikar were restored, it likely would not erase current rabbinic leadership. It would create a national judicial layer above the existing halachic ecosystem. Most day-to-day rabbinic authority would remain exactly where it is, grounded in scholarship and trust. The deeper philosophical point. Judaism after the temple did something extraordinary. It moved authority from sacred space to sacred text to sacred relationship between teacher and student. That's not a downgrade, that's portability. Let me ask you something sharper. If a person today has no certificate but has deep Torah mastery and is accepted by a serious Orthodox community, is he less of a rabbi in essence, or is he lacking only institutional recognition? That answer determines whether rabbinic authority is bureaucratic or covenantal.
He is exactly as much a rabbi as any other rabbi. The certificate is just a piece of paper. If the community respects him as a rabbi, he's a rabbi. That's Orthodox Judaism. The certificate came about as a reflection that someone has this knowledge, but if the community doesn't respect that person, they may be able to call themselves a rabbi, but that does not mean that they hold the respect of the community, and no person or few people will call that person my rabbi. They will follow the person who has created the community and who the community respects as the rabbi. The certificate is just that. It's a certificate. It's a piece of paper, just like a degree. There are people who have medical degrees, but if they don't have any patients, then no one calls that person my doctor. They're just someone who can use the title doctor. In the same way with the rabbi, even a rabbi who has no smicha degree, but has deep knowledge of rabbinical topics, is a rabbi. That's if other people consider them to be their rabbi, if they are a teacher to the community, if they are a pastoral agent, if they are a decider of halakhic rulings, they're a rabbi. And they're the rabbi. So they're as much of a rabbi as any person with a certificate. And there are arguments to be made that if they have built a community, they are more of a rabbi than the person who just has the certificate without the community. The community makes the rabbi. The certificate does not. Even though the certificate can allow somebody to call themselves a rabbi, the community is really the thing that creates the understanding. And that goes back to the Talmud, that a judge is only a judge if they have the respect of the community.
What you're articulating is not rebellion, it's a coherent model of rabbinic authority. You're basically arguing for what we could call a covenantal communal theory of authority, rather than a bureaucratic one. Let's clarify it carefully. Historically, you're not wrong. In practice, throughout most of Jewish history, a sage became rabbi because he mastered Torah, he taught students, accepted his rulings. Formal documents were secondary. Even in the Talmud, authority required communal acceptance. A judge imposed on a community without consent was not viable. Authority in Judaism has never been purely top-down. The three layers again, but sharpened. There are really three different rabbi concepts. A, judicial authority, ancient semicha, power to judge capital cases, fines, national rulings, gone. B, halachic authorization, modern semicha certificate, peer certification of competence. C, functional rabbinic leadership teacher, posek, community builder, spiritual guide. You're saying C is the real thing, and historically that's largely true. Where orthodoxy pushes back, orthodoxy would still insist on something important. Competence is not determined solely by popularity. A charismatic teacher with weak halakhic grounding does not become a halakhic authority simply because people like him. There must be real learning, real transmission, real masura tradition. So the community doesn't create truth, it recognizes competence. That's an important distinction. Your doctor analogy is strong. You said, a medical degree doesn't make you someone's doctor, patients do. That analogy actually works well. The degree says you are trained, but relationship trust makes you my doctor. Same with my rabbi. The real orthodox position, balanced, a serious orthodox framing might say, the certificate does not create a rabbi, but it protects the community from incompetence. The community confers functional authority. Torah mastery confers legitimacy. So authority is triangular. Torah knowledge plus recognition by peers, acceptance by community. Remove one leg and it wobbles. Your bold claim, you went one step further, open quote. A community building Torah scholar may be more of a rabbi than someone with only a certificate. Close quote. That's sociologically true, but halachically orthodoxy would add, if he lacks sufficient training to rule properly, he may function as a leader, but not as a posek. Leadership and legal decision-making are not identical. The deep insight you're touching after the temple, Judaism survived because authority came relational, not institutional. The Beit HaMikdash, temple, centralized holiness. Post-temple Judaism decentralized it into text, study, teacher-student bonds. You're recognizing that survival mechanism. The hard boundary where this gets dangerous is here. If community alone defines rabbi, then every denomination defines its own rabbinate equally. Orthodoxy instead says community recognition matters, but within the boundaries of halakha, Jewish law. That's the guardrail. Final thought. Your position can be framed in an orthodox, safe way like this. A rabbi is not created by paper. He is recognized through Torah mastery, Mazora, and communal trust. Certificates formalize recognition but do not generate authority ex nihilo. That's a very defensible model. Now here's the next riddle. If two communities both recognize different rabbis who issue contradictory halachic rulings, where does ultimate authority lie? That's where decentralization hits its limits.
Have you ever run into that? Yeah, I have. And it's two shuls. Imagine two shuls, less than a mile apart. Walk to both of them, member of both of them, dues paying member of both of them, and the rabbis issue different rulings on perhaps on life, on abortion. You go to one rabbi and he says you can get an abortion. You go to another rabbi and he says you cannot. It's happened. Fortunately, I didn't need the abortion. No one I knew needed an abortion, but I took this issue. I didn't want to. It just arose. And it just arose. So I don't want to get into it right now.
What you're articulating is not
I have to use the restroom.
Exactly. That's the tension in Orthodox Judaism today. Decentralized rabbinic authority versus the ideal of uniform halakha. Let's lay it out clearly. Decentralized authority recognizes its own rabbis based on Torah knowledge, integrity, pastoral skill, teaching ability. Certificates can signal competence, but they don't create authority. Even without a certificate, a sage recognized by the community functions fully as a rabbi.
There you go.
Conflicting rulings. Two communities may recognize different rabbis. They might issue contradictory rulings, sakim, scale, how. There is no central arbiter today like the Sanhedrin. This is the decentralization limit. Halakha is technically absolute, but enforcement and recognition depend on local trust. Orthodox resolution. Within each community, the recognized rabbi's authority is binding for that group. Broader disputes are resolved through discussion between poskim, acceptance of major authorities like Rabbi Yosef Karo or Rambam. The system preserves halachic integrity locally, even without a unified central authority. The big picture. Authority is relational, not just bureaucratic. Certificates formalize, but communities create rabbis. Halacha survives because knowledge, respect, and transmission remain continuous. The absence of classical semikar and a central Sanhedrin does not collapse Judaism, it changes the structure. The real question now is, could two communities reconcile their conflicting rulings without a Sanhedrin, and what mechanisms would allow that while keeping Orthodox integrity intact? This is the next frontier if you want to solve the riddle of modern halachic unity.
Yeah, let's do that. But before we do so, I'm going to have to use the restroom.
This is the instruction of the INS, instruction of the Zohar. This is a good thing. This is a good thing. Sure, one does remain in existence, but again, ultimately, to describe what the Zohar is, ultimately, again, fascinating China. So Nachman says, Yishmar the Kol Aloha. And Nachman says, no, take the job, shoot, take the job, get the money, and tell a brother you should be blessed. Because you have the opportunity to go where you have people who do that on the Zohar, that is a good thing. Take the money and go. So the verse, let me say it. Let's bring it to this verse. You cheated or not? So let's say again.
All right, here we go.
What can I do? I can probably do it, right? I can probably do it. That I have a lot about
Here we go.
Exactly, and that's where the system is clever but fragile. Right now, Orthodox Judaism works because it relies on a few stabilizing factors. Deference to recognized poskim. Even if communities differ, most turn to a few widely respected authorities, e.g. Rabbi Yosef Karo Rambam, for guidance on major issues. Based authority. Local rabbis resolve day-to-day questions. Even if two rabbis disagree, each community follows its own rabbi, which keeps each group functional. Consensus over time. Communities often converge on rulings indirectly. A sak might initially differ, but other communities adopt it if it's well argued and respected. This is distributed Sanhedrin in practice. Transmission and teaching. Rabbis. Do you want me to sketch that?
For example, put up the fence around the lion, that's when he comes on against God. Plus it says, do not plant Kilayim in your field. In the Elazorah, and with the provision of planting, the Kayim. How do I know that I'm not even allowed to do something to sustain the actual work itself, like even like putting up the fence? I'm over Kilayim. I suppose they said it's interesting over here. You are making some book about a little bit of play on words. So again, the words actually kind of slicing the concept. Low killer. You can't do anything that hopefully again enables the existence of killer. Even if it's not directly involved with the actual thing itself, it's just something that sustains it. That's maybe also what it's about. Ilu. The Gemara says the ilu, the people test the shard. But also interesting, even for the kiva. Very for the kiva. The prohibition of the that sustains the kiva. What about if somebody's going maybe to upgrade the kiva? So it sounds like that is going to be totally interesting. The Gemara says not necessarily though. Doesn't be that in everybody. This Rabbanon. Rabbanon might hear you open. I think it's really not Mishnah. No, it's not true. According to the Rabbanon, it's Rabbanon. Rabbanon put up a fence, right? Rabbanon put or actively do something that facilitates the growth of the fence.
Perfect. Let's build this step by step. Think of it as a modern Orthodox distributed Sanhedrin network that preserves halachic legitimacy, respects communal authority, and avoids centralization overreach. The nodes, local rabbis, communities. Every community has its own rabbis, the authority recognized by that community. Each node consists of 1. Torah knowledge, scholarship, 2. Teaching ability, 3. Communal recognition. Certificates, modern semicha, are optional. They formalize competence but do not create authority. Open quote. Think of each node like a server in a decentralized network. It governs its own local data, i.e. community halacha. Close quote. Regional coordination, councils of rabbis. Several local nodes in a region form a council of rabbis. Purpose, share sakim rulings. For consistency, discuss disputes between communities, vet new rulings for halachic soundness. Councils do not override local rabbinic authority. They offer guidance and harmonization. Supra-regional forum, federated council. Representatives from regional councils convene in a federated council. Their role, address large-scale questions affecting multiple communities, issue recommendations, not binding decrees, maintain continuity of halachic precedent. Again, authority remains relational. The community must accept the ruling for it to take effect. Decision protocols. Any controversial site goes through a discussion citation chain. Local rabbi analyzes first. 2. Regional council reviews and comments. 3. Federated council coordinates and publishes commentary. This ensures that even without a central Sanhedrin, rulings are transparent, rigorous, and harmonized. Digital transparency layer optional. Maintain a database of rulings, precedents, and rabbinic reasoning accessible to all communities. Preserves the Masorah, transmission. Creates virtual consensus without violating orthodox principles of local authority. Checks and balances. Community recognition remains ultimate. A local rabbi who ignores the council may still be respected locally. The council cannot enforce rulings externally. This mirrors historical reality. The Talmud emphasized recognition, not coercion. Benefits. Maintains orthodox legitimacy. No single body claims divine or sovereign power, allows coordination and consistency between communities, preserves functional continuity of halachic authority until classical semicha could theoretically return, if insight. This is essentially a modern decentralized Sanhedrin. Authority flows from Torah for scholarship plus communal respect. Coordination flows via councils. Legitimacy is relational, not bureaucratic. It solves the conflicting SAC problem without violating orthodox norms. If you want, I can draw a full schematic of this network, showing nodes, councils, and communication flow. Basically a blueprint for how a modern orthodox distributed Sanhedrin would operate. Do you want me to do that?
Construction of prohibition ultimately is a good thing. It says you get paid and Hava. I will say there is there really is such an interesting idea. Kind of like hard Western society. And that is
Perfect. Let's map it out as a clear schematic. I'll describe it step by step so you can visualize it. Modern distributed Sanhedrin blueprint. You can see the code in our conversation history. Local community nodes. Components, rabbi recognized by community. Students, yeshiva. Congregation, community. Authority, day-to-day halachic rulings, pastoral guidance, education and teaching. Notes, each node functions independently. Certificate optional. Authority comes from knowledge plus respect. Regional councils, formation, representatives from multiple local communities. It could be citywide, province-wide, or organizational clusters. Function, discuss contentious rulings between communities. Recommend harmonized rulings. Serve as a peer review system for Sakim. Authority, advisory, not coercive. Preserves local rabbinic autonomy. Federated Council formation, representatives from all regional councils could meet periodically or virtually. Function, address large-scale or national questions, ensure preservation of halachic Masorah, publish consensus guides for communities. Authority, super-regional advisory only binding if communities accept it voluntarily. Communication and feedback flow. Local rabbis submit rulings or questions. Regional councils review. Federated Council calls large-scale decisions, feedback to local communities. Communities can opt into consensus rulings or maintain local rulings. Historical precedents recorded digitally or in manuscripts. Safeguards. Local recognition remains ultimate. Nobody claims divine or sovereign authority. Certificates remains secondary. Continuous Torah transmission ensures scholarly legitimacy. Key insight, networked authority. Each rabbi maintains local respect. Councils harmonize, not dictate. Distributed checks, prevents conflicts and keeps orthodox norms intact. Masorah preservation. Knowledge, rulings, and scholarship are recorded and transmitted systematically. If you want, I can make a full visual diagram with boxes, arrows, and layers that shows exactly how the nodes, councils, and federated structure communicate, like a real blueprint for a distributed Sanhedrin. Do you want me to do that next?
sells his idol. So Adam sells his idol and he has guys for $1,000. Does that money, independently, take on the same identity? We confess as the diabolic. Does it take on the identity? Does it take on the identity of the idolatry or not? So nothing says that money is just not to be idolatry. That money is just
Alright, folks, it's doing that thing where it's creating that thing. I'm still not satisfied, but it is what it is for now. It's the snake biting. Really? No, I kind of think that just some of the responsibilities of rabbi just have become dormant in the post-Beta Mikdash or post-Mikra, traditional biblical Mikra world, and we just need to establish it, and we need to wait for Mashiach to do so, along with us and Hedron.